Title: While I was volunteering abroad, my stepfather called. I've sold your mountain cabin to settle my gambling debts. It's for the greater good, mine, he sneered. I calmly replied, hope it works out. He didn't understand how I could be so composed. When I returned, I revealed the cabin was the call that changed everything. I was halfway through my 3rd week volunteering at a rural clinic in Guatemala when the call came. The air was thick with dust and laughter that morning. Children gathered around the modest supply table, where we handed out vitamins and clean socks. They called me La Doctora, even though I was just a nurse. It stuck. Helping here made me feel like I mattered, like I was building something that meant more than money ever could. My phone vibrated in my pocket. U.S. number. I stepped away from the line of mothers with toddlers on their hips and picked up, wiping my hands on my scrubs. Hello? Hey, kiddo, a voice said. Guess what I did? I hadn't heard from him in over a year, and even then, I only called him Mike, never Dad. Mike? It's your favorite stepdad, or, I guess, former stepdad. Anyway, he chuckled like he was telling a joke. I sold the cabin, got a sweet deal too. Market's hot up there. My stomach went still. What cabin? Oh, come on. The mountain place. Your mom's old one. My grandfather's cabin. Well, sure, technically, but your mom put my name on the title during that refinancing, remember? Legal stuff, blah blah. And hey, I needed the cash. Some debts came calling. Debts? Yeah, poker got a little hot. You wouldn't understand. There was a pause on my end, a long one. Then he added, smug and slow, don't worry, sweetheart. It was for the greater good. Mine. I didn't scream, didn't argue. My heartbeat didn't even spike. I smiled and said, hope it works out. What Mike didn't know was that I had just finished transferring the remaining balance from my grandmother's memorial fund into a restoration grant. That cabin wasn't just sentimental. It was legally protected under an environmental conservation easement. The property was listed on a historic registry. It had been appraised as a landmark due to rare plant species on the acreage. And any sale, especially one without full ownership disclosure, was not just unethical. It was illegal. But Mike didn't know that, because Mike never paid attention. He didn't notice when I quietly restructured the title after my mom passed, placing the land into a co-managed trust. He didn't read the papers he signed when he begged me to help him refinance a year ago. And he certainly didn't read the clause that limited him to temporary occupancy rights only, not full ownership. I didn't say any of this on the phone. I just said, hope it works out, and let him hang up feeling victorious. Because sometimes silence is sharper than confrontation, and when you're holding the dagger, you don't need to scream to be dangerous. I looked around the clinic again. The kids, the moms, the quiet hum of people trying to build something better. I exhaled slowly and smiled again. Not for Mike. For me. Because I was about to return home. And when I did, I would bury my stepfather's smug little empire under the very foundation he thought he owned. Back to ashes. When I landed in Denver, the cold bit through my sleeves like needles. Guatemala had made me soft in the best way. Sun-kissed, grounded, alive. But this place, these people, they had a debt to settle. I picked up my rental car and drove for hours, winding through the Rockies until the tree line thickened and the elevation began to sting. I hadn't been back to the cabin since my mom's memorial service 3 years ago. Back then, it was still whole. Hand-carved porch railings, antique stone chimney, the trail my grandfather cleared himself every spring. Now, it was gone. The lot sat scraped raw, a flat, barren stretch of dirt surrounded by shattered roots, forgotten gravel, and a sold sign staked deep like a final insult. There was no sign of the cabin's bones, no farewell to its decades of memory, just loss and a construction trailer. That's when I knew Mike hadn't just sold the land, he'd sold a lie. I knocked on the trailer door. A man in a hard hat answered, clipboard in hand. Help you? I'm Claire Matthews. I'm the beneficiary on the easement attached to this land. He frowned. You the one holding up our permits? No, I said evenly. The law is. He stared at me a second too long. You with the county? Nope. I'm just the one who's going to make your buyer wish he'd never picked up the phone. I handed him a sealed packet. Copies of the conservation designation, the historic site registration, and a cease and desist letter signed by my attorney. All triggered the moment Mike completed the illegal sale. His face paled. Ma'am, we already laid the foundation. I saw. He sighed and stepped back inside. I didn't wait. I drove straight to the local assessor's office. The clerk remembered me. My mother used to bring cookies during the holidays when they came in to renew the property's exemption status. Mike Thompson's on the record as full seller, she said, scanning the file. But wait. This. She flipped the page. Her eyebrows rose. You're the trustee? I nodded. Then he can't legally sell. Not without co-executor permission, which is your signature. Which he doesn't have, I said flatly. She leaned back in her chair and gave me a slow smile. Well then, I think you've got a hell of a case. Mike thought he'd cashed in. He had no idea the title was still tied to a trust. He had no idea the land had no clearable building rights due to protected watershed regulations. No idea the easement contract I'd locked in had banned commercial sale unless approved by the board of local land stewards, of which I was one. But he would. Because the man who sneered, "It's for the greater good," mine, was about to watch his good unravel, piece by fraudulent piece. And I hadn't even knocked on his door yet. The paper cuts deepest. Mike was living in a short-term rental outside Boulder. I found the address in the construction permit records. Sloppy paperwork, just like him. The door was open when I arrived. A dog barked somewhere deep inside. A game show hummed from the living room. He was eating a microwaved burrito with his bare hands and grinning like a man who thought he'd just won the lottery. Claire, he said, full of fake enthusiasm. Back from the jungle? Back from saving people who actually deserve it, I replied, stepping in. He chuckled, oblivious. Look, I know you're probably a little surprised about the cabin, but trust me, I made the right call. The buyers were eager. Big developer. Said they're gonna put in this gorgeous luxury rental, ski-themed. We're talking insane returns. I asked, folding my arms. Mike gave me a slow, sleazy wink. Come on, kiddo. We were family once, and technically, I owned half. I tossed the file onto his coffee table, a neat packet of legal documents with a red tab where the trust clause lived. He didn't open it. You signed away your claim when you refinanced and failed to pay back the restructuring loan. Clause 14. I paused. Which, in case you didn't read, defaulted your privileges to the co-trustee. Me. He blinked. You're bluffing. No, I said. You are. That contract you signed wasn't just for a quick cash injection. It was a transfer of rights you were too stupid to read. His smile faltered. I stepped closer. You didn't sell a cabin. You attempted to sell protected land. You forged implied ownership. You greenlit illegal construction on a landmark property. And you did it while signing away every legal defense you thought you had. He stared at the folder now, like it might bite him. What happens now? Oh, I said, shrugging. Well, the building permits have been frozen. The buyers are furious. You'll likely be sued for breach of contract and fraudulent misrepresentation. There's a chance the county files charges too. You wouldn't do that. I smiled. I don't have to. The county clerk already did. I just handed them the truth. He slumped into the couch like someone had taken the air out of his lungs. I needed that money, he mumbled. Yeah, I said, to cover your gambling debts. He looked up. How Did you know that?" "Mike," I said, walking to the door. "You called me and told me. Remember, you thought you were clever." He stared, mouth slightly open, like he still couldn't believe I wasn't sobbing, begging, or broken. But I wasn't. I was calm, focused, surgical. "I don't want your apology," I added. "I don't want a single cent. I just want you to feel what it's like to lose something you thought you could abuse without consequence." He didn't say a word, and I didn't give him a chance to. As I drove away, the mountain stood tall behind me, silent, unchanging, just like the cabin had once been. But this time, I wasn't driving away in pain. I was driving toward justice. And Mike? He was sitting in the ashes of his own arrogance. The collapse begins. It took 5 days. That's how long it took for the developer's attorneys to send Mike an official notice of contract breach. The email had leaked, first to a local real estate forum, then picked up by a small regional news site under the headline, "Land Dispute Halts, $2.7 million mountain development." "It was all a scam," says investor. I didn't write the article, but I did send the folder of legal documents, the trust, the easement, the frozen permit, to the reporter anonymously. The public record spoke for itself. On day 6, the buyers filed civil charges. By day 8, Mike's name was blacklisted in 3 surrounding counties. By day 10, a lien was placed on his personal accounts. His once loud Facebook profile turned eerily quiet. No poker night selfies. No, just closed another deal posts. Just silence. And then, the GoFundMe. Help Mike Thompson save his home. Goal, $50,000. Raised, $320. Top comment, maybe don't steal from your dead wife's kid next time. I didn't donate, but I laughed, softly. By the time I returned to the cabin property, the developer's trailer was gone. In its place stood nothing but caution tape, a rusted shovel, and a half-dug foundation that would never be poured. Nature was already reclaiming the scars. Birdsong, pine needles, a fox trail through the snow, untouched. I stood on the edge of the clearing and closed my eyes. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice. Keep the land clean, keep it protected, and never let anyone take what was built with love. I hadn't just honored that. I had defended it. That evening, I received a voicemail from Mike. He didn't sound angry. He sounded broken. "Claire, I know you think you've won. Maybe you have. I screwed up. I screwed up bad. I didn't think it mattered anymore. Your mom's gone." The place felt like a memory I was allowed to erase. A pause. "But you didn't forget. And I guess that's what makes you better than me." I didn't respond. Some apologies don't deserve a reply. Instead, I scheduled one last meeting with the Land Preservation Council. They welcomed me with handshakes and warm coffee. I handed them the final grant paperwork. They reviewed the application, smiled, and approved it on the spot. The mountain cabin lot was now permanently preserved. No sale, no building, no exploitation. A forever space. Wild, untouchable, like some pieces of our past are meant to be. Mike would never touch it again. No one would. And every time he drove past that stretch of road, he'd see the wooden sign rising from the trailhead. Matthews Ridge Conservation Site Protected Land, in memory of Grace and Elias Matthews. My mother, my grandfather, and now, me. The legacy you never had. The thing about people like Mike is they don't fear loss. Not really. They fear shame. They fear irrelevance. Mike could survive foreclosure. He could survive court dates and empty bank accounts. What he couldn't survive was being forgotten. Or worse, redefined. So that's what I gave him. I waited until the local paper printed the second story. The first was about the development scandal. The second was about the new land preservation designation. They included a photo. me standing beside the council, smiling, a copy of the easement in hand. The article was titled, "Daughter Protects Late Family Legacy from Fraudulent Land Deal." They didn't mention Mike by name, but they didn't need to. Everyone knew. 3 days later, I attended a regional land stewardship expo. I gave a short talk on environmental grants and legacy preservation, mostly technical details, small audience. But one local nonprofit asked to record the session for their website. I agreed. During the Q&A, someone asked if my family had always supported conservation. I paused, then said calmly, "Not everyone. But sometimes, what you build in silence outlasts the people who tried to silence you." A few heads nodded. No one knew the backstory, except Mike, who I knew would eventually see it. The final move came quietly. I opened a scholarship fund using the last of my inheritance savings. Not flashy, just enough for one student a year, a first-generation environmental science major, with preference given to applicants who had lost a parent. I named it the Grace and Elias Matthews Fund, for those who protect what others abandon. Mike's name, nowhere. And yet, he would see it in the press release, in the foundation registry, on the metal plaque I commissioned for the trailhead gate. I wasn't erasing him. I was replacing him. Weeks passed. Spring thaw began in the high country. The cabin foundation stayed frozen. Not in ice, but in law. I heard from a mutual friend that Mike had moved into a basement sublet near Greeley. Still drinking. Still blaming. Still insisting that I'd tricked him. Let him. If denial was all he had left, let it keep him warm. I, on the other hand, had peace. I'd protected my family's legacy. I'd turned my pain into purpose. And I'd destroyed my stepfather's lies without screaming, slamming, or making a scene. No exposed secrets. No dramatic courtroom speech. Just cold, elegant facts. And a name. Mine. Carved in wood. Anchored in soil. Built to outlast the loudest liars. Mike always believed he was untouchable. He didn't realize I'd been planning this longer than he'd been bluffing. And when he sees that trailhead sign again, he'll realize that I was never the soft one. I was the storm that never made a sound, but took down his entire house. Peace needs no witness. It was early June when I returned to the cabin trail again. The air was cool, the kind of chill that kisses your skin without needing to prove a point. Pine needles crunched underfoot. Wild violets peeked through the forest floor. The trees had grown fuller, greener, as if reclaiming what had been threatened. At the trailhead, I stopped beside the new gate. The metal plaque caught the sun just right. Matthews Ridge Conservation Site, in loving memory of Grace and Elias Matthews, for those who protect what others abandon. I ran my fingers across the engraved words, tracing the name that had once felt so heavy. Now, it felt like mine. I took the trail slowly, not because it was hard, but because I wanted to remember every step. The same trail I used to hike with my mom on Sunday mornings. The same switchback where my grandfather taught me to track deer. The same overlook where I once sat, sobbing in the snow, thinking no one would ever see me. But I had been seen. By the land. By the silence. And eventually, by myself. At the overlook, I sat down on a flat stone, pulled a thermos from my bag. Black coffee. Bitter, clean, honest. Across the ridge, the mountains rolled like waves frozen in time. No houses, no developments, no foundations. Just sky, stone, and memory. I pulled out my phone. I had one voicemail. From Mike, 3 days old. I didn't listen. I deleted it. I've come to realize something about revenge. The point isn't to destroy the person who hurt you. The point is to destroy the version of yourself that believed their approval was necessary. Mike no longer had power over me, not because I ruined him, but because he had already ruined himself. And I had simply stepped aside and let the truth speak. I don't check their names online anymore. I don't replay the call in my head, or the insults, or the moment I smiled and said, "Hope it works out." Because it did. Not for him. For me. I stood, slung my bag over my shoulder, and headed back down the trail. There was no music, no slow-motion triumph, no dramatic final blow, only the sound of wind between the trees, only the quiet. And I realized that was all I'd ever needed. Not to be applauded, not to be feared, and just to be free. You are not alone, and you are so much stronger than you think. Tap that subscribe button to join Veiled Revenge, where we share tales that heal, inspire, and remind you that even the deepest heartbreak can lead to the most beautiful new beginning. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that revenge isn't always about getting even. Sometimes it's just about getting better.